since you brought up redemptive entrepreneurship, business, however you want to frame it. When I first started at Refinery, I went to a conference at Threefold at the old like Northview on Binford campus or whatever. And Andy Crouch was there and he spoke, and he has a book called Strong and Weak. And he does like a 2x2 matrix of how do you find redemptive pursuits within your industry. So I remember sitting with this 2x2 matrix like a ton. I did it for Refinery. I did it for my residential real estate. And not to leapfrog any other questions, but like that's how I got to tenant first real estate, was through this 2x2 matrix from Andy Crouch that was like, oh, what's the way that I can pivot against what everyone else is doing in a redemptive way? Because like, I'm not going to explain the whole 2x2 matrix because I will not do it justice. But basically, there's one person who's exploiting another people group. If we think of real estate, we all know who is exploiting, or who we all think is exploiting: landlords. And like landlords are exploiting tenants, right? So like
not with my investments.
Correct. And that's not how it should be. So when I do it, I was like, okay, so what's the redemptive thing? Well, what if I became a landlord through the lens of my tenants? So if I chose the tenant instead of the property and I let it be a tenant-led process, that's a way that I could redeem, which leads to where tenants then don't get into these like fight, flight, or flee situations because of exploitive landlords. Instead, they build relationships and they stay long-term. So then now full circle with South Africa, why we call our real estate Funanani Homes, Funanani Ministries was who we were with in South Africa. And it was Funanani Academy. Funanani means let's help each other. So I've always seen it as let's help each other through housing is like what we are doing. And it's the same ethos. It's the same heart of what we were doing in South Africa. So bringing the redemptive piece and the missional piece.
It also reminds me of Tim Ferriss says, what if you do, it's in the intro to, what if you do the opposite?
Yeah.
Sometimes like something's not working, traditional landlordship. What if you do the opposite?
Right.
Put tenants first.
Yeah.
I think I met you at a perfect time, at a perfect crossroads, because I was just getting into my first property, having just nightmare situations. And I was being very much the traditional landlord, right? It's got to be this way. You're living in my house by my rules.
Yeah.
And this is how it's going to be, and laying the law down. Not really. I just had a property manager doing it and probably doing that effect. And then we met, and he told me this profound story about how you identify a tenant and then you go out and buy a house for him. It's kind of like you need a new couch. You go to Ashley Furniture, you meet the couch guy, and he gets you a couch, right?
Yeah.
You meet Addison, and he gets you a house and places you as a tenant.
Yeah.
Maybe not exactly that,
It's pretty
everybody,
close.
but kind of.
Yeah.
And the reason that happened is because you had a tenant, and you knew that you have a very profound buy box as well, and you knew I had a few listings in that direction. You're kind of exploring them.
Yeah.
And then we got to talking. I'm like, wait, you like know your tenants that well? Like this is the process. And I thought that was really cool. And I went out and bought 2 properties.
Yeah.
Like 2 months later, I was like, I'm going to identify the tenant, buy the property.
That's awesome.
And put them in there. I don't think anybody else does that. Like at anywhere. I've never ran into it where you actually interact with tenants on a daily basis. Yeah. Talking about your cousins, right? Talking about the janitor at the church, or so it was just from that matrix is where that was born, or what's the through line of how that became?
Yeah, so that matrix was there kind of guiding the thoughts. And I would also say it was probably 3 years into real estate investing before I even coined in my own head tenant first real estate. It's more so, this is what I'm doing. You know, I looked back and I was like, the process was happening, and now I can label the process. But that 2x2 had been framing of like, how can I be redemptive in this? And it was, I read Brandon Turner's, the book on rental property management or whatever.
Probably talks about getting a good credit score, getting a good, 2 to 3 months of income.
I skipped all those chapters.
Right.
I was just like, this isn't of interest to me. And it was, don't let your tenants know that you're the landlord. So if you show up to the property, tell them you're like the management or something like that. And I remember going to the first property and I was going to do that. And I was like, no, why would I do this? I was like, I own the house. Don't screw me over. But
you're showing up as a real person.
As a real person.
As Addison Newell, not I'm going to put on this mask of landlord.
Yeah.
I used to show up to my property and say I was part of the management company.
Yeah.
And then I realized like, this is so weak. It's not even funny. It's like, I'm the owner. I care about my property. Do this the right way. That was a much more effective for me,
right? Yeah. Well,
than masking myself.
Yeah.
I went 2 steps back, right? I threw the manager in front of me and didn't go to the property. And like, it was a terrible experience. But the next one I'm there, tenants moving in, we've identified them, got the property, and I'm like going through, a move-in checklist. And halfway through, I'm like, hey, I don't know if you realize this. Like, I'm the owner of the property.
Yeah.
You were talking to Trent previously, whatever. That auto pay for rent has called for 2 maintenance items, has sent me invoices from like Lowe's picking things up for the property.
Yeah.
Hey, there was a leaky pipe. I'm just going to fix it. Yeah. I watched YouTube and I'm going to do it. And I'm like, sure.
Yeah.
On the quarterly thing, show me what you fixed so I make sure it's not screwed up.
Well, and I'll tell you a super recent example of where it pays off. One of the houses was having an issue with the toilet. They contacted me at 8 p.m. at night. I said, all right, I'll have someone there first thing in the morning. I send the person there. He had it was my handyman. He botches everything, or he botched everything in that situation. So then I was like,
get in your handyman, bro.
yeah. So I was like, because I told him, when it's a toilet problem, this is like pro tip. Typically just replace the toilet. You are a lot of money ahead. There's a couple troubleshooting you can do to know if it's a sewer line problem. And at that point you're in trouble, but like most of the time your toilet's just like stopped working. And so I send him there. He doesn't do it right. Comes back to me and was like, hey, you need to call like a real plumber to come out here and clear the line. So I'm like, I know it's not that. I know it's the toilet, but I'm going to do it anyway. Right. So I called the plumber. They come out the next morning. I pay an expedited fee. I get him to come out. And after all of this, so after probably $400 to $500 to just replace a toilet, which I was like sent him the first time, the tenant sends me kind of a crappy text message of just like, well, we went like 2 days without a toilet or something like that. And I said, so I just could go back and say, here's when you contacted me. Here's what I did about it. Here's when I got that information. Here's what I did about it. I'm glad your toilet's working now, and period. And then underneath it, now here's the human part. Know that I went above and beyond for you on this to make sure that this could be done as fast as possible. Remember that you know me and I'm a person. And they sent back, they're like, I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't mean to send it that way. That wasn't the tone. And like, they were genuinely apologetic, but I have to remind them I'm a person. If they've never met me or they're dealing with just a property management person,
right,
I probably don't get this like reconciled text message back that's like actually pretty kind. And then the next time they had an issue, like a bird died in their flue or something for the HVAC.
Dang it.
It was like, I said, hey, I'll be over at this time. And like when we got it resolved within like 12 hours, I got a really nice text message that was like, hey man, thank you so much. I know we hadn't reached out to you for like anything. And then 2 big things happen in a row. Like, we really appreciate you. All these different things where like, it's just because I was human with them,
Well, what's interesting is like, if that was in your own home, it's going to take 2 days.
Yeah.
And that's the reality. You're just maintaining the home. I had a similar thing with HVAC, and I've talked about it way too much on this podcast and almost got myself in trouble for the deal that I got for it. So I'll just punt and move on.
One more thing there, which is like the difference in that is going to be a relationship versus non-relationship will also affect longevity of the tenant staying there.
That's true. Vacancy wise.
When an ex-manager was managing mine, every turn they'd leave. Every turn the person would leave.
Yeah.
The minute I stepped in, it's like, this person is attached to this property. Yeah. Someone cares. It's a home. Yep. It's the difference between a house and a unit and a home, I think.
Yep. So, and that's cool. One of our core values for when I did the kind of EOS process for Funanani Homes. Our second core value is homes, not properties.